But first, thank you for everyone that is joining us today. My name is Andrew Fisher, and I'm the founder and CEO of QuaIL Technologies. We develop quantum computing and artificial intelligence resources for the financial services industry. And I'm joined today by Jason Pereira, who I've had the pleasure of speaking with several times, and I'm always impressed with how in tune he is with the financial advisory space and always knows what's going on with the latest and greatest technology and how it's being leveraged by financial professionals. Jason has had a very impressive career with positions from financial planning and advisory, serves on several boards of various AI companies, and has received a number of awards and recognitions. And I could go on, but I will end there, pass the mic to Jason, and give him an opportunity to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his career and his focus.
Yeah, I mean, so first and foremost, I'm a financial planner, and I've always been a technophile at heart. So basically, I'll go back to the financial planning thing for a second. I've been heavily involved in the development of the industry for the last several years, regulatorily and in collaboration with various associations. But for today's topic, it's focused over on technology. So when basically the story goes, when the fintech scene started to pick up in Canada, I basically reached out to a lot of these companies asking if they were planning on doing anything for the advisor space because I wanted to leverage from what they were doing. And that turned into a bunch of friendships and network that basically resulted in me just being, knowing what was going on. And what happened was without even trying, I started landing speaking gigs at advisor conferences because I appeared to be the one who knows what was going on. And that led to me starting a podcast to just, explore and start recording some of these conversations, which was like 330-ish episodes deep now. And over the 6 years that was, I've basically evolved into also kind of the advisor tech authority in Canada. Plenty of them in the U.S., several guys I know who I'm friends with. But I kind of sit on an interesting center of the Venn diagram between practitioner and tech expert.
Lovely. Yes. Awesome. And very excited to hear your perspective and sort of, I know that you're always on the ground talking and having conversations and really, again, at the forefront of what's going on from a technology perspective within the space. Today's topic is on financial advisor productivity as well as some of the regulatory and ethical considerations. So let's just jump into it. So the first question is, given the conversations in the rooms that the conversations you're having in the rooms that you are in, what would you say are some of the primary ways that you are seeing financial professionals leverage artificial intelligence?
Right now, it's very early innings. We've at least gotten out of the buzzword phase into the early instance phase with some products already in market and a lot more coming. So the use cases are generally all the first ones out there were the low-hanging fruit, the stuff that we started seeing elsewhere, right? So chatbots where you populate them with information regarding a topic, so taxation, whatever else it might be. So that's one. Then you also had basically the meeting transcription, right? A very common thing basically that is used amongst, embedded into Zoom and other tools. But the thing about those ones is that the value proposition there is that whereas Zoom and everybody else is basically looking at a broad segment of the market, basically everybody, getting that right, the context right on what's being said is difficult. Whereas it's easier to train models around terminology within an industry because the amount of information is narrower and it's going to be more accurate that way. So you're seeing those. You're starting to see some early productivity tools in terms of proposal generation, things that would have taken hours to generate, being able to tap into multiple resources and generate proposals. Extraction of data is a big one, whether that be tax returns, investment statements, whatever it might be. So these are all solutions that are still newer to the market and basically at this point still in the early stages, right? Like they're not fully baked. They do something well, but in terms of baking themselves in the ecosystem, making themselves seamless, that's not there yet. But there's a lot more coming, right? There's a lot. I'm involved with several companies, some of which I can speak with, some I can't, but that will get into things like, basically expanding on beyond productivity, training, and helping advisors be better advisors. I won't go into too much detail there. And in addition to that, but on the productivity side, the curation of data, all the communications coming to us. How do we basically better curate that to action that into basically applying CRMs or upkeeping CRMs and doing all kinds of other things. So it's really, really early. Most advisors are probably at the point where they have zero AIs working for them, but that's going to change.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. We often say that we don't believe that AI is going to replace financial advisors, but are certain that it will inevitably be used by every financial advisor in some way, shape, or form.
Look, the replacement of X profession, okay, is a techno-utopianist view, typically basically dreamed up by engineers who have a very limited understanding of what that actual profession does. That's the reality of it. And history has taught us that. History has taught us that in multiple industries, and history has taught us that in this industry. For this is probably the third or fourth innovation I've seen that's going to put financial advisors out of business. Yet there's more of us that are doing better and bigger and doing more work. At the end of the day, the human AI pairing is far more powerful than relying on one or the other.
Yep, no, I couldn't agree more. And you mentioned something a little while ago in terms of security. I mean, there's a ton of data specifically within the financial services industry, and the importance of being very specific and precise with the information that is returned by these AI, whether it be chatbot or predictive analytics, is incredibly important. There's a lot at stake if the data returned is incorrect or the information generated is false. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of how that can be prioritized from the builders of the AI's perspective through to the people that are using the technology. How can they ensure that they're doing so in a responsible manner with this consideration in mind?
So that's a loaded question because there's a lot of dynamics to that. So let's just start top down from the base fundamentals of actual what legislation says needs to be done and what we need to do as a basic standard of care, as my camera freezes on a weird face. So my AI camera, but for the record, which is true. So first and foremost, depending on country you're in, there's legislation that governs exactly what the expected table stakes are on some of this. So, for example, the SEC passed regulation not that long ago that by a deadline, everybody's got to be SOC 2 compliant in the advisor space of using that technology. So you have first and foremost, you have the security concern of, are you stewarding the data as a vendor yourself, and is the advisor confirming that? Then you have the issue about when you're communicating between systems, basically, are you living up to those standards? So that, basically everybody who's SOC 2 compliant advertises are SOC 2 compliant. It's pretty easy verification in that regard. But the bigger thing we have to remember here is that these are going to be honeypots of data, right? The amount of AI whereas we have honeypots of data elsewhere, right? As forgetting data lakes that are being run by large organizations, CRM, if you're a small advisor, CRM, portfolio management software, document storage software, all of that, your email, those are all little silos of honeypots, smaller honeypots. But what's going to happen with the AI piece is the AI is better the more information you give it. So the incentive is to give it everything. And as that happens, that becomes a big honeypot of data. So the question becomes, first of all, so shoring up that security has to be first and foremost paramount. Like it's basically not just about, because we're not just training the model. Some of that stuff is legitimately getting stored as part of said training, right? So how do we protect that? That is a question that is frankly the vendors that have to live up to. The other concern then comes down to user behavior. The user behavior aspects, and I mean, we know we're not supposed to send sensitive information over email, but let's be honest, we all violate that on a daily basis. But it's a different standard when you're the one doing it with someone else's data. Case in point, we have privacy legislation in Canada that frankly, will not be followed, or is not being followed by many people right now in the use of open protocols. I think it's known amongst the tech community that essentially do not put private information into this, let alone third-party private information in this, or anything you don't want to get out there, because frankly, Google proved they can extract personal identifiable information from it. So when I see advisors talk about how they're putting all their meeting notes in it and helping, develop like client documents in it, I cringe and shudder at the thought of it all. Like that's nuts. Like, that behavior has to be learned. And what you're starting to see now is there's going to be a need for awareness around all the security issues, specifically new security issues surrounding privacy and what should go into these things. And you're starting to see solutions come out of it. I did meet with a company that developed an overlay to all the different LLMs that existed in the open market, and basically would provide a abstraction layer that would basically pull PII, personal identifiable information, out of the submissions, as well as basically create audit trails and prevent certain, some other compliance tools to prevent certain actions from being taken. So that's going to start to basically be a thing. So from a security standpoint, first and foremost, everything should start from a security standpoint. All right? Every small business is one violation away having to notify people from a major devastation to their business. So that has to be taken very seriously. And frankly, like, the financial services industry has always been about one thing in its core, and that's trust, right? Yeah, I trust McDonald's not to poison me. Okay, fair enough. I can get food poisoning, but geez, like I really trust my bank and my financial institutions not to destroy my financial livelihood, right? So especially when you with also the fact that AI is going to be used in a lot of these crimes, right? We're already seeing it used in impersonation scams, and we're getting to the stage now where we're going to be having pretty soon to having live chatbots that have my avatar that will respond almost as fast as I type. It's going to be, security is going to be first and foremost on people's mind. At least it should be.
No, I definitely agree. And it's something that I think is actively being discussed. I mean, as it is here, which I think is great for the industry. But then comes the actual application and making sure that the businesses and companies that are not only building AI, but are leveraging it, are making sure that people are appropriately aware, to your point, of the different considerations and mindful of how they need to be leveraging the technology.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of cognitive burdens. Of basically having to put that onus on the user, right? I think some of this is product design. Some of this is going to basically, and we're like, look, different countries have different privacy legislation. U.S. privacy legislation isn't exactly great. That's why you're able to create some of the companies I see down there that you can't create elsewhere. But the point here is that there's gonna be legislation and regulation that catches up with this issue, right? And frankly, any forward-thinking company, especially servicing this industry, I mean, the general market stuff, you got to be careful of because they're just, half of it's for amusement. Anyone serving this industry is going to have to adopt a very high standard and not wait for legislation to get there. Because if they don't, trying to do it later is just painful. But doing it now, it becomes not just a selling point. It becomes, security is table stakes. Defining the degree of security and making sure you've thought through the second, third order issues when it comes to transference of data, when it comes to all of this stuff, that is a differentiator, right? Because no major institution who's looking to onboard this stuff is interested in basically putting out a notice that they violated your privacy.
Yep, that is very true. And we'll circle back to some of the legal and regulatory considerations in a bit, but I want to focus in particular on the client engagement perspective, in the sense that it is one thing to use AI to help predict, what is going to be the best performing assets and allocating portfolios accordingly. But when you're taking the output of some of these generative models and using them to build reports and build client documents to construct communication with clients, I mean, there's a whole nother degree of certainty that comes into play, making sure that the information being provided is accurate. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts in terms of, what that evolving space looks like.
Well, I mean, right now, anyone who is using any kind of transcription service and not proofreading it to ensure accuracy is playing with fire, right? Because at the end of the day, when it comes to compliance challenges, it's what you can prove. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. No. The AI must have got that wrong. Oh, really? The AI got that wrong? Where's your proof the AI got that wrong? Why would you save it if the AI got it wrong? Is that calling the question that all your notes are garbage, right? Like this, so basically, at this point, we are in a leverage but verify situation. But the problem is it's just too easy to not, right? So you have that problem. Now, that's going to get better, no doubt, but it's never going to be 100%. Now, the other piece of this is that, look, the generation of all this stuff, we're playing an interesting game. There's always an interesting tug of war between standardization and efficiency and human experience. Because, frankly, like, there's certain things that absolutely should be just focused on nothing but the speed and accuracy and efficiency of it. Account opening. Once the client knows has been sold and the portfolio has been put in front of them, and everything is ready. They're like, yes, sign me up. That should not be a process that takes like days to produce documentation. That should be okay. We've gone through the workflow, proposals generated. I hit a button. I've already got other information from them that I've extracted from the documents that I used to collect, and maybe some gaps. Let's ask them that, and let's move. Like, it should be built for speed. Absolutely. No one wants administration to be an experience, quite honestly, right? Like, if someone can find a way to make an administration experience, I would love to see it. But the other side of that is becoming obsessed with that to the point where advisors can fall into the trap is if they start to push the busy work down to the consumer, right? And they just make it all about getting their work done and not about the experience. So what's been the trend in specifically the US market with all the technological innovation in the last 20 years in the space has not been towards using efficiencies to grow larger and larger books of people on a headcount basis. It has been to basically actually service fewer, but in a deeper way, and basically expand upon the service offering. That's because of a couple of reasons. A, look, if you're all about efficiency, that's a commodity. That's going to, if you're going to lean into that, it's going to become a price war, and good luck competing with the big boys, right? That's the reality. The scale, individuals can't do that. That's the realm of BlackRock, Fidelity, Vanguard, all those already there who have the scale to basically just worry about efficiency and win on price and efficiency. On the other side is the experience side, and the reality is that if you're going to maintain the margins in the wake in the view of the option for these do it yourself to do it at like 15, 30, 40, 50 basis points, whatever else it is, you better be providing something different. Now, what is the difference? That difference is not to do conventional. It's basically to go deep. It's to go deep in relationships. It's to go deep in needs. It's to go deep around niches and concepts of things that actually people care about. Because this industry all too often is caught up with the fact that we think people are coming to us for investing in insurance and returns and all the other stuff. No, they're coming to us for one key reason. They want to live a life that they want to live, whatever the vision of that is. And the money and the products and the accounts and all of this is nothing but the tools that we use to get them there. But if we obsess about the tools, we lose sight of what's important to them. And by focusing on the fact that the tools can be used incredibly well to just kind of go into the background. The best technology is the stuff that just hides in the background, right? That just doesn't see. The best AI is not going to be the AI that I go in and I'm using this AI console. It's going to be a function. It's going to be a function in sort of, it's going to be a tool or it's going to be something I don't even think about built into a console where I go in to do X, right? So the reality is that this entire tug of war back and forth, the reality, I think, advisors have to think very carefully about how they have a limited human capacity based on the fact they're still using, caveman technology that is their brains to keep things straight and deal with a number of people and realize that, that efficiency, they can lean into it and they can have, they can try to expand their numbers. They're just going to be playing a more expensive version of a commoditized game, whereas they can differentiate themselves around the actual experience and the value they deliver to their clients.
Yeah, that was very wonderfully said. And I think you mentioned something there that I often talk about, which is that often, as I speak with other companies and just have an understanding of what's going on in the market from a building perspective, I often see people that are building AI for the sake of building AI. To your point of, are we getting too focused on the technology and too far away from what it is that the technology is being used to help us achieve? And with that said, that the AI comes into play not only, to your point, from the execution perspective and improving efficiencies, but from the important components that are specific to your point, the difference between the smaller players and the bigger players, and really being able to create that relationship, that very deep relationship, so that you fully understand what it is that your clients are trying to achieve and what are their life goals and their objectives and what does that look like for them specifically.
Yeah. I mean, like I said about advisors getting caught up in the tools, engineers get caught up in the tools just as bad, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, look at this new shiny thing. I mean, I fielded a call probably a week every 2 weeks for the better part of 6 to 9 months. So lots of calls from AI startups who wanted to pick my brain on things. Right? I'm working with a few of them. Many of them, I burst a lot of bubbles. Right? They come to me and say, "Oh, we're looking to do this meeting transcription service, and that's going to empower your workflows and get things triggered in the back end and all this other stuff." And I sit there and be like, "Have you seen Zoom lately?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You explained to me the value proposition about what you're doing." And it was just they come from outside the industry and they didn't understand it. It was clear. And then I'd say, "Well, yeah, we can empower." Then they'd be like, "Well, but then we can use a trigger workflows." I'm like, "What workflows?" You seem to think that these workflows are all there. Right. The average advisor, some of them absolutely do. Some of them have very simplified workflows, which are nothing more than triggering a task that sets off a series of other manual tasks, but not necessarily automated. Some of these people had this dream or this vision that we were all working off these all standardized workflows that previously, like, we had to manually trigger it ourselves, that were all automated. Nope. the ones that I am working with and the ones that I have come, was impressed by was value propositions that got away from the technology, from the, oh, look, here's the easiest implementation of this technology. Let's make a chatbot for you. To do what? To do what? To serve what purpose? To provide what to me, other than utility that I can basically get from a generic tool that you want to charge a premium on now that maybe it's going to be a little bit better, but maybe not. Is it worth the delta, right? And the ones that were impressive are ones that basically identified a specific need in a marketplace. So I'll give you an example of the one that I'm publicly already advising inside of the UK. It's a company called Advisory AI. And, sharp group, one guy was an advisor, so he got it, but he still was like in awe of everything that the AI can do. And it went from a boil the ocean conversation to, in that meeting, starting to target some stuff, to coming back and having subsequent conversations. And one of the reasons why I worked with them was they zeroed in on a very painful use case in the UK. And that's the fact that any recommendation made requires something called a suitability report to be generated, which is a process that is highly manual and typically requires in the neighborhood of about 2 hours to get done before you make that change. And you're talking about an advisor spending time doing maybe multiple per week. These things are being outsourced for 200 UK pounds per pop. And they basically applied the AI to it, created templates, brought in data from other places, allowed for the upload of PDFs surrounding the products that were going to be uploaded, and push a button within a few minutes, the entire thing is generated, right? They addressed a very specific pain point, an efficiency one, that was preventing people from spending more time with their clients. And the lineup's at the door right now, and right now execution is the only thing that matters, right? Because they've got a use case that can be expanded on to other areas of pain. So that's a perfect example. It's the ones that basically just like, oh, but the AI can do anything. Yeah, you're not going to build this massive omnibus platform that's going to be the AI of financial services. You're not. What you are going to do, what is working, is finding the one unique point solution, because the efficiencies on those that the AI can bring to a point solution to solve one problem really, really well, if it's a real problem, is unprecedented. It's unprecedented the speed at which these things can basically be worked. And I think that's being reflected in what I'm seeing in the marketplace for AI startups in terms of their seed capital. AI startups in the advisor technology space raising between $3 to $5 million on seed rounds is unheard of. And at first I was a little bit frightened by the money I was hearing being thrown around, but it dawned upon me. End of the day, the productivity upside on this is so big that I think we're going to see a very short cycle where these companies prove a use case, start to scale up, and then get bought out by larger enterprise players or platform players who can then roll it out to all of their companies within a couple of weeks. And that's really, really what I think is going to happen, is that we're going to see a lot of really rapid rises in sales in this space of people who actually nail a legitimate use case. Now, that's on the productivity side. I think where it's going to be more difficult in general, or it's going to be more telling, is when we start using AI, and more powerful, is when we start using AI to enhance the experience, not the administration. The administration, absolutely, we all want that digitized and out of the way. But at the end of the day, like when we start figuring out and start using use cases beyond just, oh, I don't have to take notes because the transcription is working and I'm focusing on this conversation right now, not distracted by anything else on my screen. When we get beyond that and we start thinking about how this AI might be able to do real-time intervention into meetings when things are going wrong, or reminders, and be like the assistant that's sitting there with me to basically kick things along, that basically reviews how I performed in the meeting and tells me when I was maybe callous or maybe just not sensitive enough to someone's needs, or I failed to pay attention to something that they said was important to them. Like, when it makes me a better advisor, and hopefully by extension makes me a better human, and by extension a better advisor because I'm more human, that's when we're going to get into something that's going to be truly profound.
Yep. Yeah, we'll have to come back to that at a later time. It's outside the focus of this one in particular, but I know that we've discussed the behavioral component in the past in terms of not only from the advisor perspective, but from the investor perspective of how are you managing that and improving it. And to your point of the pace and the speed that people are going to be able to sort of build things and get them into market, I liken where we are at with artificial intelligence and a lot of the model creation to the Industrial Revolution, in the sense that time period brought factories to cities and was a huge economic sort of impact. But where we're at right now is effectively giving everybody the capacity of a factory to go out and build something. And to your point, I think it leads to rapid growth and innovation. Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I am, but I'm also going to say that it's halfway between the Industrial Revolution and halfway between the blockchain revolution. In that, how many altcoins were stood up and don't exist anymore? Why? Because they were chasing whatever little hopium dream they had that just didn't make any sense, and there was no market for it, and it was never going to make it money. I think it was nonsense. So I think I will say that keep in mind that a lot of these companies have this technology is so accessible and so easy to implement compared to previous technologies in the space that literally you have these companies proving test cases within days, literally days. Like let's prove it. Let's actually prove we can do this. We can do it. Great. Now we know we can build off it. You never had that before. So the speed at which these things are being developed because of the accessibility of the technologies is vastly amazing. Now that's going to lead to a lot of spaghetti against the wall all over the place. We're talking pets.com era of the internet, right? Where basically it was anything can go on the internet and we're going to make a fortune. That's everybody in AI right now. Anything can be AI and they're going to make a fortune. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. We see a lot of failures. A lot of people get nowhere because, and I've said this to companies before. It's like, look, the reality is that look how fast you got to this point. There is nothing stopping someone from getting to that point in the exact same amount of speed or maybe a little faster. So the question becomes, how do you basically hold on to market share when people can mimic and adapt at such a quick speed, right? It used to be that the amount of time you spend investing in your code early on was a little bit of a moat because for other people to catch up with you, it would take in the 18 months it took you to get to market. Now it's so much faster. So the only thing you can actually do that does create a moat is to create a deep and meaningful actual value proposition that is executing and doing it at a high level that makes the switching component ridiculous. Like, if I've got something that does that, if I've got something that's doing the job, 95% of the time accurately and has got down to human interaction on the 5%, and someone else comes along and says, yeah, we copy them, we're 10% better. No one gives a damn. No one gives a damn. Not a generative AI product, but, an AI related product, Conquest Planning, which I've been working with for a while. They've got first ones to throw artificial intelligence to financial planning. And I remember talking to people who were just like, yeah, but you know what? They're not really using machine learning, or we can do better AI, or we can do whatever. And I sat across from us like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's a satisfaction level that gets hit. And once you hit that, even if you're 10% better, you're not good enough. It's going to take an order of magnitude improvement before people care about the alternative. So as an AI company in the space, right, you're going to see a lot of companies that basically fill a space really quickly. I'm already seeing that in the advisor meeting note space. Right. And I met with a few where I'm like, okay, not bad. Or, okay, I see where you're going. Okay, your direction. And I've met with a few where like, okay, you've thought this through. You've thought this through. And it's not just about the transcription is just a starting point, right? It's just the easy value proposition that you're basically going to use as the capture point before you start rolling out all of this additional value that is going to make you indispensable. And that is, so we'll get through all the terrible altcoin phase or the pets.com era with all these things dropping off, but we're gonna see a bunch of, and it's gonna take a while to sort through them. But we're starting to see a few that I think are aiming quite well, and will basically have some success in the next little while.
Yeah. So it really comes down to identifying that pain point and building a really powerful and deep and meaningful product to address that. But it brings up another interesting point, which is that as the need to specialize to really establish a strong customer base and really capture and hold on to that market share, as that need sort of increases, I wonder what your thoughts are in terms of the idea that you will ultimately need 5, 10 different AIs in order to accomplish the entirety of the business. Do you foresee that being the path forward?
The answer is right, but not the way you said it. Because the AI will not be the thing that gets sold. Right now, we're selling the internet. We're selling blockchain. We're selling the tech. We're selling the algorithms. No one cares. They care about the job to be done. You will have various technology platforms. Nothing's going to change in one regard. Okay. You have all-in-one platforms, and then you have disaggregated platforms that basically integrate, but are not one thing. And so you can get best in class, but then it's not going to be, it's not going to basically tie together as tightly as the all-in-one, which is not going to be best in class. AI is going to sit inside all of those. It's not going to be that I'm tying in 7 different AIs. It's going to be that thing that was in the all-in-one is added a bunch of tiny AI points that are basically doing this, or the segmented approach where on best in class is all going to have a bunch of different AIs built into them.
Yeah, so the products themselves will experience the AI incorporation such that it's not necessarily up to the individual, or rather necessary for the individual to go out and identify what are, the most powerful AIs. It is what are the most powerful products, and all of those products will inherently have AI.
Like think about how we get used, we consume the marginal improvement in our lives, and our idea for what something is shifts, right? And the reality is that a lot of what we considered, what people, I honestly think what we a couple of years down the road, we'll think of what AI we considered marvelous AI today is just going to look laughable in a lot of cases, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, think about when Siri came out, and everybody's like, oh my God, like we have artificial intelligence on a phone. That's fine. And like, now do I even think about it? I mean, like I'm someone who literally turns on and off lights and locks down the house with voice commands on a daily basis. And do I think of that as artificial intelligence, or just think of it as a function, right? So the reality is we're getting obsessed in talking about the tools. We're getting obsessed in talking about the blockchain can enable this. Like the best use of the blockchain is for me never to think about the blockchain. It's a protocol, right? Like the best use of HTML is for me never to think about HTML, right? This is going to basically be, it's not the star. It is the tool set in the background that makes it work.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Now, shifting gears to the regulatory component of using AI and really just tools in general for the advisory services, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I know you said earlier, and obviously there's a lot of differentiation between different markets, different parts of the world, and how they're approaching and addressing the concerns around artificial intelligence. But I think my question rather is, what should these regulatory and government agencies be doing? Should there be more sort of specific market-specific focus? Should it be a greater, sort of larger conversation? What does that look like from your perspective?
Well, Pandora is out of the box, right? At the end of the day, like this is the same thing about should the U.S. regulate the use of AI? Well, congratulations, you do that in the U.S., but then you probably hamstring yourself, and your foreign actors who don't like you are just going to ignore it and get some sort of advantage over you. So it's difficult to put the genie back in the bottle, if not impossible. So the question comes down to what can we do to protect consumers? Yes, there are governmental level principles and laws that should be passed. Not so much, some of them targeting AI and the use of it, more so like around concepts, right? Like again, privacy and information, the use of personal information. Like, you don't have to target AI to do that specifically. You just have to basically establish the rules for how that, what the duty of care is for anyone to do that, right? And there's definitively, because of the severity or the potential for this technology, the need for international collaboration on this. But that's a really difficult one to pull off, really difficult, and I don't have a lot of faith in it. Regulators always, they're always playing catch up, right? They are not the ones out there creating stuff. They're the ones having to see what happens, understand it, figure out how to solve it, and then put rules in place that some people try to get around over and over again. And it's this never-ending game of whack-a-mole. I think what the shift towards, at least outside the U.S., towards more principles-based regulation, I think is the only way to do it. When you start to do everything codified, all you do is create the gaps. When you create principles, you can always point to and say that was a violation. You did X, Y, and Z, but that you didn't adhere to a principle. And we don't have to spell out every freaking use case for what you can't do. Bottom line is it crossed this line because it crossed the principal line. So, and you're starting to see that already. And I contributed a little bit of I'm not sure how much of the wording got changed because of me, but FP Canada, the equivalent of the CFP board in Canada, the issuer of the CFP in Canada, basically already has regulations regarding the use of technology. And that use is effectively combating the concept of moral hazard and consumption of marginal utility, in that, if the AI, if the computer does something, it's just, if I can literally get the function up by pushing a button to service a client, then that's a great productivity thing. But you can use that, but you can't delegate to it. You can't delegate the knowledge to it. You have to understand how that tool got to that conclusion. You have to understand what the assumptions underlying that conclusion were. So, oh yeah, great, I can hit a button in Conquest and it'll produce a financial plan. I can go use that. Yes, but you better understand the inputs, and you better understand how every one of those recommendations was arrived at and why. You can't just basically take it the blank slate, right? You just can't take it. I mean, one of the hallmark of the ignorant online for years was, well, let me Google. Oh, no, I Googled it and I understand it now, right? The current hallmark is, oh, I asked ChatGPT. Well, first off, hold on a second. This is on a subject matter you don't know what the heck you're talking about. Do you know you even prompted it right? And you sure as heck don't know if they got it right or not, because ChatGPT is programmed to always give you an answer. Okay, so does it care if that answer is right or wrong? No, it doesn't care, because it doesn't care. Period. It gives you the answer that it thinks is probabilistically the best thing. Any number of things can go wrong. I mean, we had to create a concept called hallucinations to explain when these things go really wrong. Okay, so the hallmark, like I said, of the ignorant is to think that they can just understand a concept just by asking. That's fine. It's going to be right. Nonsense. Any kind of subject matter out there is still going to require its experts to know when the AI has gone wrong, right? And it might get better, and it will get better over time. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, there's nuance, and there's always going to be a difficulty in crossing that human to digital bridge. Just even knowing what to ask it in the right way to ask it, to make sure it doesn't lie to you, is already something you got to be aware of, and it's got to be contextual based on what you're doing. So the reality is that the regulations that say you cannot just depend on this blindly, that is absolute nonsense. Your accountability as a professional still relies on that. That is the kind of regulation we're going to see. Say you're free to use this stuff. There's security regulations, there's privacy laws. You have to adhere with all the laws of the land. But from a regulatory standpoint, you're the professional being paid for something. You're accountable for the output.
Mm-hmm. Yep, most definitely. Trust but validate. If we're there, and we often say that the best solutions come from a symbiotic relationship between man and machine. So having that person present and really signing off on ultimately what gets put out into the world to clients and executed upon, I think, is incredibly important. Go ahead.
No, so 100%.
I want to take a moment quickly to see if there are any questions. If you are joining us, there should be a chat function where you can go in and start asking questions. There's sort of chat and Q&A. But I know one question that's come up time and time again is, really for those that are not familiar with the technology at a very technical level, what can the average advisor sort of do to get started, not only from increasing the knowledge that they have, but how do they actually implement that in the business?
Look, first and foremost, they got to think like an entrepreneur. Most advisors often rely upon broker dealers or someone else to basically make a lot of decisions for them. So first, take ownership. Second piece is you have to be aware. You have to be aware of what is out there. So there are conferences, there are webinars, there are podcasts, there are all kinds of things. So you got to start to get a general sense of what tools are out there to help you. And then I will always say this: it doesn't matter what tools are out there. There is no magic tool that's going to make you a better planner. You have to have processes in place. You have to have systems. You have to have protocols. All those things can be used. Can be then all those systems can then be supported through technology. Technology is not a strategy. Technology is there to support your strategy and implement it. So that is effectively the way to do things. Is basically be aware, get your act together from a human level first. Use the technology to basically support to digitize that entire process, and then it becomes this interesting feedback effect, because as you get a better idea for what's possible with the tech, you get better ideas for how to run your practice, and then vice versa, all the way around. But I would say, look, when I've gone to conferences where I'm speaking, and said, okay, how many of you have not played with ChatGPT? And the hands go up. I'm like, why? We're literally talking about one of the biggest revolutionary changes in technology in your lifetime, and you haven't been able to visit a website? I'm not trying to shame you, but if you're already behind the eight ball. You're already behind if you haven't done that. So just be curious. Mm-hmm. Just be curious and experiment and learn. There's no harm. Take 15 minutes a week. Just look up companies you've heard of or things you've looked at and play around. No harm.
Yep. I agree. You don't learn by thinking, you learn by doing. You got to get out there and experiment. And to your point, just be curious.
So we got one question. Here we go.
Join us. If you have time, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
How can you strengthen your AI stock trading by incorporating sentiment? And on top of all these algorithms, market does not always respect react. Here's what I'm going to tell you. You're not going to like my answer. The market is the most highly evolved gladiatorial arena in the history of mankind, with billions of dollars, the equivalent of GDPs of nations thrown at it to get a slight edge. Guess what? You're asking that question. It's too late already. There's already people with more resources than you that have done that and are already doing it. What is the up-to-date on AI stocks? What AI stocks? I mean, like, the reality is that everybody's playing NVIDIA, right? Like, there are no companies out there where, like, look, I'm the big AI company. Like, look, it's too early. It's too early. And then when you start seeing a bunch of companies that are AI specific get launched, get ready for a lot of them to go broke. We don't know who the winner is going to be. And I will always say this: would anyone have picked an online bookstore to be one of the most powerful companies in the world? I sure as heck wouldn't have made that bet.
That's a good point. Yeah, time will tell.
Yep. Excellent.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thank you again for taking the time to join us today. I'm looking forward to keeping the conversation going with you in the days and years to come. So congratulations on very successful career and all the recognition and many more to come, I'm sure. So we'll end it there. And like I said, we'll get these up so that we'll continue to get the knowledge out into the industry, and hopefully all of these things come together to help us realize that vision that we all have. So thank you again, and thank you for everyone that joined us as well.
Take care.